Fiberglass tent pole, the kinetic dome. The heavy segmented black poles used to erect massive family tents. Aluminum bends and stays bent, but fiberglass uses a microscopic glass thread matrix. In a severe windstorm, this matrix allows the entire pole to bow violently inward to absorb the kinetic energy, then instantly spring back perfectly into a rigid dome. Steel anchor peg, the brute force spike. A massive, thick steel spike with a welded crossbar driven into the earth with a mallet. Standard lightweight pegs pull out when holding down a heavy 8-person tent. This stake relies on sheer physical mass and brute friction. Driven deep into compacted dirt, the thick steel shaft creates an immovable underground barricade that will bend a hammer before it pulls out in the wind. Guy line shock spring, the wind dampener. A heavy metal coil spring attached directly between the tent cord and the ground stake. A sudden, violent gust of wind acts like a whip, ripping the fabric loops right off the tent. This heavy-duty spring intercepts that shockwave. It physically stretches under the sudden load, stretching the chaotic kinetic energy out over time and saving the fragile tent fabric from a catastrophic tear. Rotomolded cooler wall, the thermal vault. The incredibly thick, seamless plastic walls of a premium camping cooler. Cheap coolers are glued together and leak heat in hours. This is molded as a single, unbreakable piece of armor and injected with 3 inches of dense polyurethane foam. It acts as an absolute thermal vault, physically trapping the cold inside and blocking the sun's radiant heat from melting your ice for a week. Rubber T-latch, the vacuum seal. The heavy rubber strap used to lock down the lid of a rotomolded cooler. If air moves, ice melts. You don't just close the lid, you violently stretch this heavy rubber down over the pin. The extreme elastic tension mechanically forces the lid perfectly flush against the interior gasket, creating an impenetrable airtight vacuum seal that stops all convective heat transfer dead in its tracks. Cot frame hub, the elevated chassis. The reinforced metal joint connecting the folding legs of a camping cot. Sleeping on the cold ground actively drains your body heat. This specialized bracket unfolds to create a geometric suspension bridge. It transfers the heavy, concentrated weight of an adult perfectly down into the angled legs, elevating you securely above the freezing dirt without collapsing sideways. Propane thread valve, the pressurized gateway. The brass threaded nozzle on top of a massive green camping propane tank. Inside that tank is not a gas, it is a highly volatile liquid held under extreme pressure. This brass valve uses absolute forensic threading. When you screw on the stove, a central pin physically depresses the internal seal, safely converting the violent compressed liquid into a steady, controlled stream of burnable gas. Wind deflector, the flame barricade. The folding metal walls surrounding the burners on a heavy 2-burner camp stove. A simple breeze will physically blow the heat away from your frying pan. These metal panels act as an unyielding aerodynamic barricade. They physically block the crosswinds, creating a perfectly calm, isolated microclimate over the burners, guaranteeing every ounce of heat is forced directly up into the cast iron skillet. Cast iron lid, the steam trap. The massive, incredibly heavy flanged lid of a camping Dutch oven. You don't just boil food in camp, you bake it. This lid is designed with pure thermal mass. Its sheer, unyielding weight physically traps the steam inside, creating a pressurized cooking environment, while the flanged top edge allows you to stack burning coals directly on top, creating a perfect 360-degree outdoor oven. Great leg lock, the fire-forged support. The simple, folding steel legs on a heavy campfire cooking grate. Aluminum melts in the campfire and plastic hinges disintegrate. This mechanism relies on brutal simplicity. The thick steel legs swing down and physically lock against the frame using pure gravity and tension. It creates an immovable, fireproof platform capable of holding 50 pounds of cast iron directly over open, roaring flames. Hatchet cheek, the geometric splitter. The rapidly expanding, thick V-shaped profile of a camping hatchet. A machete is razor thin for slicing vines. It gets stuck in solid wood. A hatchet uses violent geometry. The edge cuts the first inch, but the rapidly expanding metal cheeks act as a massive physical wedge, violently forcing the wood fibers apart under immense kinetic force to shatter the log in a single swing. Saw raker teeth, the sawdust clearers. The alternating, uniquely shaped teeth on a heavy-duty camp saw. Standard saws cut cleanly but get permanently jammed in wet green campwood. These blades feature specialized raker gaps. While the sharp teeth tear the wood fibers, the deep raker gaps act as tiny shovels, physically aggressively dragging the sticky sawdust out of the cut, guaranteeing the blade never binds. Lantern mantle, the incandescent ash. A fragile, glowing fabric bag hanging inside a liquid-fueled camping lantern. The fuel itself doesn't make the bright light. The hiker ties this fabric mesh over the gas valve and burns it to ash. It becomes a fragile ceramic skeleton coated in rare earth metals. When the invisible pressurized gas burns inside it, this skeleton violently glows with a blinding, pure white incandescent light. Tilt hinge, the focal ratchet. The stiff plastic hinge connecting the main headlamp body to the forehead strap. Walking requires seeing the trail, cooking requires seeing your hands. If you angle your neck down for an hour, you will severely damage your spine. This stiff plastic hinge physically targets the beam, allowing you to ratchet the blinding light down to exactly 45 degrees, locking the illumination on your workspace while keeping your neck perfectly aligned. Folding chair hub. The collapsible node. The central heavy-duty plastic or metal junction box on a modern collapsible camp chair. A standard lawn chair is too massive to pack. This central hub is an engineering marvel. It acts as the master structural node, receiving all the individual aluminum leg pulls. It perfectly receives the heavy, dynamic weight of an adult sitting, yet allows the entire frame to be violently disassembled into a tiny packable tube in seconds. Lithium power station, the silent grid. A heavy box-shaped battery replacement for loud gas generators. It doesn't just store power, it physically converts it. The internal inverter takes raw DC battery power and chemically transforms it into a flawless, pure sine wave AC current, allowing you to run sensitive medical devices or laptops in the middle of the woods without frying their circuits. Propane tree. The fuel manifold, a tall metal pipe that screws directly onto a massive 20-pound propane tank. Running multiple hoses to small disposable green tanks is incredibly wasteful. This heavy steel pipe acts as a pressurized traffic cop. It channels the massive pressure from the master tank upward, safely splitting and regulating the flow into 3 separate horizontal ports, powering a stove, a lantern, and a heater simultaneously. Butane mosquito repeller, the chemical dome, a small handheld plastic device used on campsite tables. Bug spray relies on coating your skin in chemicals. This device uses a microscopic butane flame to heat a specialized blue mat. As the mat reaches exact temperature, it physically vaporizes the repellent, violently pushing the chemical into the air to create an invisible 15-foot impenetrable dome that aggressively blocks mosquitoes from entering. Percolator coffee pot, the thermal pump. A heavy metal or enamel coffee pot containing a vertical metal tube and a top basket. There are no electronics to brew the coffee. As the water hits an aggressive boil at the base, the pure thermal pressure physically forces the boiling water violently up the center tube, cascading it over the top of the coffee grounds in a continuous gravity-fed loop until the brew is perfectly dark. Jerry can bleed valve, the flow equalizer. The small secondary cap located at the very back of a massive 5-gallon heavy-duty water jug. If you open the front spigot of a massive water jug, the water chugs violently and splashes everywhere. Water cannot exit if air cannot enter. By opening this tiny rear valve, you allow atmospheric air to physically rush in, perfectly equalizing the internal pressure and instantly transforming the violent chug into a flawless glass-smooth flow. Solar shower bag, the thermal absorber. A thick, heavy-duty black PVC bag hung from a sturdy tree branch. You don't need a fire to take a hot shower. The physical color and material are highly engineered. The dense black PVC acts as an aggressive thermal sponge. It physically catches the sun's ultraviolet radiation, violently trapping the energy and transferring it directly into the water, heating 5 gallons to over 100 degrees in just 3 hours. Self-inflating pad, the expansion vacuum. A heavy, thick sleeping mattress filled with open-cell memory foam. You do not need a pump to fill this massive bed. When packed, the foam is brutally crushed and the valve is locked. When you open the valve, the crushed foam physically violently springs back to its natural shape. This mechanical expansion creates a massive internal vacuum, physically sucking the outside air into the mattress until it is fully inflated. Duck canvas exterior, the abrasive shield. The incredibly thick, heavy outer fabric of a Basecamp sleeping bag. Backpacking bags use ultra-thin nylon to save weight, but when weight doesn't matter, you use heavy cotton duck canvas. It acts as an unyielding medieval armor, physically deflecting sharp rocks, dog claws, and campfire sparks, ensuring the fragile internal insulation is never compromised. Hummock strap, the weight distributor. A flat 1-inch webbing strap with multiple loops wrapped around a tree. Tying a thin rope around a tree to hang a hummock will physically saw through the bark and kill the tree. This flat webbing uses surface area physics. It wraps completely flat against the trunk, perfectly mathematically distributing the heavy, concentrated weight of the human body across a massive surface area, leaving the tree bark completely undamaged. Wire gate carabiner, the dynamic link, an aluminum metal clip used to connect the hummock to the strap. It seems simple, but it handles extreme dynamic force. As you bounce in hummock, the weight drastically spikes. This specialized wire gate physically locks tighter under load. The heavy aluminum spine takes 100% of the vertical force, creating an unbreakable mechanical link capable of holding thousands of pounds of kinetic energy. Roasting stick, the thermal distance, a metal fork with a wooden handle that extends outward like an old radio antenna. Holding a short stick over a roaring base campfire will blister your hands in seconds. This tool uses collapsible mechanical friction to create absolute thermal distance. You extend it out 40 inches. The intense radiant heat of the fire physically dissipates into the air long before it reaches the insulated wooden handle, keeping your hands perfectly safe. Bear spray deterrent, the chemical barricade, a massive, highly pressurized orange canister of concentrated capsaicin. This is not standard pepper spray. You don't aim this at the bear's eyes. When you pull the trigger, massive internal pressure violently blasts the liquid out at 70 miles per hour. It creates a 30-foot expanding impenetrable cloud in the air, forcing the charging animal to run face first into an inescapable blinding wall of chemical fire. Collapsible sink, the accordion hinge, a large wash basin made of hard plastic rims and heavy silicone rubber sides. Carrying a rigid plastic bucket takes up too much space in a car. The flexible silicone features highly engineered alternating geoelectric creases. When you press down, it forces the walls to violently fold in on themselves like an accordion, instantly collapsing a massive 4-gallon water basin into a perfectly flat 1-inch thick disc. Cassette toilet, the hermetic seal, a square plastic Basecamp toilet consisting of 2 completely separate tanks. Odor and waste must be completely isolated from the campsite. The upper tank holds clean flush water. The bottom tank holds the waste. Separating them is a heavy sliding blade valve. When pushed shut, it physically creates a hermetic, airtight rubber seal, absolutely trapping all toxic gases and liquids in the lower vault until it is safely emptied. USB string lights, the low-draw canopy, a long strand of microscopic copper wire embedded with microscopic LED diodes. Standard heavy lanterns drain massive D-cell batteries in a single weekend. These lights rely on raw electrical efficiency. The microscopic diodes require almost zero wattage. You plug them into a tiny USB battery bank and they chemically convert a fractional amount of power into a massive radiant canopy of light, running continuously for days on a single charge. Cast Iron Skillet, the thermal battery. A massive, incredibly heavy cooking pan forged from a single piece of iron. Aluminum pans lose heat the second the wind blows. Cast iron relies on brute mass. It acts as a massive thermal battery, physically absorbing and storing immense amounts of heat energy, then radiating it perfectly evenly across your food, completely ignoring cold winds or uneven campfire flames. Pocket bellows, the Oxygen Injector. A collapsible telescopic metal tube used to blow air into a dying fire. Blowing on a fire from a distance scatters your breath and wastes energy. This tool uses fluid dynamics. By blowing into the wide end, the telescoping metal tube physically compresses and accelerates the air, injecting a highly concentrated, high-velocity laser beam of pure oxygen directly into the deepest, hottest coals to instantly ignite wet wood. Heavy-duty tarp, the suspended canopy. A massive sheet of woven polyethylene fabric used to create a dry living space above the campsite. A tent only covers your bed, a tarp covers your kitchen and dining room. It isn't just waterproof. The woven plastic grid physically catches the falling rain and, when rigged on an angle, perfectly redirects thousands of gallons of water away from your cooking station, creating a massive, impenetrable dry zone. Folding camp shovel. The trench digger, a heavy-duty collapsible steel shovel used around the campsite. You don't just use this to bury waste. When a severe rainstorm hits, water will flood your tent floor. The hiker uses the locked steel blade to rapidly dig a geometric trench round the tent, creating a physical moat that catches and violently redirects the flowing groundwater safely away from the shelter. Camp mallet, the kinetic driver. A heavy, short-handled hammer with a massive rubber or steel head. Pushing steel stakes into hard dirt with your boot will break your foot. This tool is a pure kinetic energy transfer device. You swing the heavy head, and the massive, concentrated weight physically drives the thick steel stake brutally deep into the compacted earth, securing your shelter against hurricane-force winds. Dry bag, the watertight vault. A heavy PVC or nylon bag with a specialized roll-top closure. Zippers leak when submerged. This bag relies on folded compression. You physically roll the stiff top fabric over itself 3 times, violently bending the material and snap the buckle shut. This folded geometry creates an absolute impenetrable watertight barricade that can be thrown directly into a river without letting a single drop touch your sleeping bag. Bungee cord, the dynamic tensioner. An elastic shot cord with metal hooks often used to tie down tarps or gear. If you tie a tarp to a tree with a static rope, a heavy gust of wind will rip the fabric. Bungee cords introduce a dynamic give. Under a massive wind load, the internal rubber strands physically stretch, absorbing the violent kinetic spike, then aggressively pull the tarp back to absolute perfect tension the moment the wind dies down. Camp French press, the microscopic plunger. A rugged, shatter-proof coffee maker utilizing a steel mesh plunger. Paper filters tear and clog in the wilderness. This system uses mechanical separation. The metal screen is perfectly engineered to match the internal diameter of the pot. As you push the plunger down, it physically traps the coarse coffee grounds at the absolute bottom, allowing only the pure, extracted liquid to pass through the microscopic steel grid. Vacuum mug, the thermal void. A heavy-duty stainless steel camp mug engineered with 2 separate walls. A standard metal cup instantly transfers the heat of your coffee straight into the freezing morning air. This mug contains a literal vacuum. All the air has been violently sucked out between the inner and outer steel walls. Because heat cannot transfer through a vacuum, it creates an absolute unyielding thermal barricade, keeping your coffee piping hot for hours. Soft cooler, the closed cell barrier. A highly portable, waterproof cooler bag carried with a shoulder strap.
You can't lug a 100-pound hard cooler down to the river. This cooler relies on high-density closed-cell foam. Unlike a sponge, the microscopic bubbles in this foam are completely sealed off from each other. This creates a flexible, lightweight, yet completely impenetrable thermal barrier that perfectly traps the cold without the massive bulk of hard plastic. Purifier pump, the mechanical filter. A hand-operated pump connected to a ceramic or carbon filter block. You can't just drink water from a stagnant camp puddle. This tool uses pure mechanical pressure. You violently pump the handle, forcing the dirty liquid through a dense ceramic core. The microscopic pores physically trap and block parasites and heavy metals, pushing out absolutely pure, safe drinking water through the other hose. Hanging organizer, the vertical deployment. A fabric roll featuring multiple mesh pockets that hangs from a tree branch. Digging through a massive plastic bin for a spatula destroys your camp kitchen efficiency. This tool uses vertical space. You unroll it and strap it to a tree. It physically transforms a chaotic pile of cooking gear into a highly visible, instantly accessible vertical armory, allowing you to grab knives, spices, and tools without ever breaking your cooking rhythm.